Okay, Toyota is now ticked off. And next up, we have got Triumph. As I'm just going to level my chair down a little bit. So let's go and do it. So we need to head back now to the UK, as we've pretty much done all of the Japanese manufacturers now. And we need to go to the very end to get to Triumph. And although most people obviously know Triumph these days for being a motorcycle manufacturer, they did used to be a car manufacturer as well. And they were also under the ownership of British Leyland, which is partly why their whole automobile ambitions were basically cut off. But they did leave us with this iconic Spitfire right here. And as you might have guessed, this car is most likely named after the Spitfire plane, which is perhaps one of Britain's most iconic pieces of just vehicular engineering period. And this thing only has 71 horsepower, but I think we should be okay. Plus, I chose this thing in maple simply because... Just wiping my nose a moment there. Simply because... well, I haven't driven a car in purple for a while. And hopefully we won't need any tuning for this. So let's go and see how we do in the Spitfire Cup. Limited only to the Triumph Spitfire 1500, and we will get 15 grand total if we can achieve winning all 5 races. This is the exhilaration of having an orthodox English sports car at your fingertips. So we're heading to El Capitan, followed by Motegi West, which is obviously the short track Motegi variant. Then we've got Autumn Ring Mini, followed by Clubman Stage Route 5 and Seoul Central to send it off. So, without further ado, let's begin in Yosemite National Park. Alright. We are going to try these races again because I did manage to get to the last race at Seoul Central before, but because the seemingly unpredictable and, well, to be honest, evil weather patterns that keep showing up, basically, I had been on the wrong side of a photo finish, which basically means I finished second by an extremely narrow margin. I can cope with that the first time, but the second time, especially when I'm dealing with nerve irritation, basically I went from being upset to just being angry, and I decided instead of just stacking up loss after loss, I was going to start this again and make sure that I actually put together a more palpable effort, and one that I could at least be satisfied with. And I think under the circumstances, given, as you may have guessed, this car technically is named after the Supermarine Spitfire, which, to those of you who watch me and are probably also experts in aviation history, you will of course know that the Spitfire is often heralded as being one of our most iconic fighter planes. Well, that of course aside from the Hawker Hurricane and also the Afro Lancaster, just for context as to how iconic those planes really were during the Second World War. And likewise with the many iconic names for planes that the Allies came up with, there were also plenty of cars that, as you may have guessed, were quite literally named after those planes. And as you might have guessed, the Triumph Spitfire, of course, was obviously one of them. And, of course, to those of you who don't know, the Ford Mustang itself was also technically named after a fighter plane as well. Which, as you might have guessed, was technically used by the US Air Force. Mainly used, of course, in the Pacific War, I believe. But either way. So, back to this event now, and as you can already see, with El Capitan being more of a player's venue rather than the AI's venue, I have taken the lead pretty early, and it looks as though I am pretty much going to stay there. Although one pattern I did notice was that with the colours that the AI were using, they were more or less using pretty much the same colours that they were essentially flying with for pretty much the entire event, mostly. Like, they weren't really changing colours, they were just more or less flying in the same colours over and over again. Most of the time, anyway. But again, that's why I chose to drive this thing in purple, because, well, I figured this thing looks really good in purple. And not really downshifting because, well, to be honest, I'm not really losing too much in terms of RPMs. And because we're going downhill again, I just figured I might as well, you know, keep it in 4th gear and just see what happens. And I think I might have actually picked up a few tenths through there, as I just hit 100 heading into this hairpin. And now down into this tricky section here. Can be quite easy to go off course here if you're not able to hit the apex. And heading over the bridge. I also quite like how with this car you can basically drive it and you're not having to put your foot on the brakes so much through some corners, because you can just pretty much, you know, glide your way through the corners because your car practically has the nimbleness to do so. And although you don't really get to do this with most cars in this game, I am definitely glad to say you can at least do that with this car, because I will say one thing, this car is pretty fun to drive in my opinion. It's definitely one of those hidden gems that, you know, if you're looking for agile nimbleness, to where you can just quite simply stick it into a corner, and then maintain whatever cornering speed it is you're doing. This car will basically do that. And that's what I think in a lot of ways makes it so unique in those regards. And this is despite it not having power steering. As everyone finishes race 1, with the blue Spitfire coming in last. Don't really need to say anything, we're just gonna get on with the race. I've noticed the AI most of the time tend to pretty much race in the same colours anyway, so really doesn't matter in terms of how they do it, but I know exactly what colours it is they will be racing in most of the time because, well, I've seen them race in these colours before. Honestly, that's probably one of the smoothest first corner exits I think I have probably ever had in pretty much any car I've driven. It was honestly just beautiful with how my car just glided through the corner. I think it's probably one of the best corner exits I think I've ever had. You know that feeling you get when you put in just the right amount of input to get the smoothest follow through possible. That's pretty much what I did for the end of that first hairpin because it just felt so right the way I did it. It was honestly just one of the best driving feelings in the world. Well, sim racing driving of course, even though I am using a controller, but nonetheless, it really is just a very pleasant feeling that you really don't get to appreciate very often until you get to those moments where you really are just having fun. And I think that's just what I was doing. I've really got that first corner absolutely nailed with just the way I keep going about the corner exit. As I now have virtually a 2.5 second lead up front. And you know what? I think because I actually had some paracetamol or Tylenol, depending on where you live, before actually trying this again. In a lot of ways I think it has managed to relieve whatever headaches or nerve irritations I might have had the first time around. Even though I wouldn't have suspected them to be there at first. But the way weather patterns have been constantly changing recently and just not really seeming to stick to one pattern, I generally do feel like in a lot of ways I have made myself more comfortable, as I pretty much blitzed the field once I took the lead. I really don't think I need to say anything else. Still, one thing I will say about the old guard of the automotive industry, at least compared to the new guard, where it seems like, in a lot of ways, the corporate takeover has, in a lot of ways, pretty much killed off the creative influence that a lot of car production essentially used to have among its colour choices and also its designs. And while I do get the understanding of cars today having to be safer, I will say that it was definitely from profiteering over that blandness that in a lot of ways had also technically killed the variety of what used to come with the colours of car culture. Like, oftentimes when you see most production cars in a dealership, you normally tend to see them in either black, white, blue, red. What else is there? Or grey. Like, they're pretty much the typical paint jobs that you expect to see on most cars nowadays. And while there are definitely some engineers out there who would obviously want to include more variety among the colour choices I just mentioned, and in some cases to make the designs of cars today look more like high-lookers, it's hard to say if whether or not they'll manage to bring the stylization of the automotive world we used to have and see if the sort of variety that we used to have, especially with cars in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and hell, even the 2000s had some pretty good lookers as well, with the colour schemes they had with some of them. It's hard to tell if whether or not we will manage to... It's hard to tell if whether or not we will manage to get back to that era of automotive creativity, but I certainly hope we can see more good-looking cars in the future, whilst also, you know, pretty much having all the safety innovations being fitted without the cars not having to look, you know, saggy or sappy in really any way. Because even I will admit that some car designs I have seen recently, I will definitely say there's at least one or two that I can call straight up ugly. But it's not many of them. Because obviously I don't choose to be cantankerous like some people when it comes to opinions on car designs, or really anything else for that matter, because, well, reasons. Anyway, 3 races down, let's head to race 4. At least before the pollen completely murders my voice. You know, I get the idea of me obviously racing against you know, the same cars over and over again because, well, obviously it's a one-make race, but I do wish there was, you know, just a little bit more variety among the colour schemes used by the AI, because, I mean, they do make it look a bit blatant with the fact that 9 times out of 10 they're basically just racing in the same colour schemes over and over again without really, you know, thinking in a way to, you know, change things up. At least for 1 or 2 races. Because, you know, I like to at least see opponents with variety rather than it just being the same paint jobs I just, you know, keep seeing over and over again, and this is getting ugly. Where did you come from? How did you get all that turbulence? Honestly, what the fuck just happened? He quite literally just got to the left-hand side and then basically just dived on both of us. I did not think that was even possible for the AI to do that, but well, I guess from time to time they can surprise me in ways that I wouldn't normally expect. Although one design choice that I will say was quite unique for the time was the fact that before rear view mirrors became pretty much mandatory on all car designs, for safety reasons of course, I find it to be quite unique in a way. I still hit the back of him even though I really did my best not to. I was trying to sweep out the way, but I could do nothing about it. I will say one thing though, he is giving me a fight, and he's really running me so razor close to the wall. But he was not able to stop me from passing. And how convenient it is for me to head through the tunnel in second, and then just come out in first. In a lot of ways, I would almost consider that to be like a signature move. But since I'm now up front, and I don't have to deal with any dirty air, this race is pretty much as good as done, as long as I don't hit the wall. And that time I actually got a nice flowing run of that final corner that time, which is what I wanted. But either way, there we go. Four races down, and I think that run was actually really good. Once I took over the lead. And you know what I'm gonna do now? I think I'm actually gonna overwrite that other replay because I might get some better shots from CSR5 compared to El Capitan. it's also because I don't have any shots of Clubman stage, Route 5, normal in the one make events. At least I don't think I do anyway. So that's why I overwrit it. Or overwrote it, I should say. Okay. This was the bogey race before. But since I am not dealing with any headaches or really any nerve irritations this time, I might have a stronger shot of pulling this off. But if I am going to win this, then I need this to be a flawless run. Because this is one of those races that does reward what's pretty much near perfection in a way. And already I ran very wide. Probably wider than I should have done, but I think I've more than made up for it. And this time the gap is only under 3 seconds. Whereas before it was over 4 seconds because, well, I lost a ton of time with me not being able to just thread the needle through that second right-hander the way I should have done before. But anyway, this time putting together a much better run and also a much smoother run as well, which is what I want at least. And I think I might actually have a good shot at winning this time. Hopefully. Because I've got to the front in a shorter amount of time, and I was also clinical with the double pass I made following the right-hander. In other words, I basically got through that right-hander with just the right amount of speed to basically slot myself in, and I might be able to do the same again. Well, once I find a passing maneuver to pull off, that is. Because whilst I could make this a cooler finish and make it a side-by-side finish, I think it's just easier for this race to be done and make sure that I somehow do manage to get it done if I can. And I still run into the back of him even though I really tried my best not to. Get a little bit of a nudge there, but they do say Robin's racing, and since he's now backed off the throttle, I was able to scrape my way through. Didn't give him a bump from behind either, so it wasn't a bump and run. I simply just got alongside him and, well, he basically yielded. Which, to be honest, is basically what I had to do, because I wanted to make damn sure that if this was going to be an event sweep, I wanted to at least make sure that I did it with me up top, and with me not having to do anything dramatic to end it off. And that's what I did. So, 2-second victory over the white Spitfire, and then it was the red Spitfire who finished in 3rd. And there's the rest of the order. I have a replay saved, so let's go and get our prize car. It will probably be another Spitfire from what I can see. And yep, sure sure enough, it does turn out to be another Spitfire. With a nice white soft top. Yeah, did I mention this car is a convertible? I feel like I should have mentioned this car is a convertible, technically speaking. Or at least I think it's a convertible, to some degree. Anyway, Spitfire Cup is now done, so all that's left in Britain is TVR. And then after that, we'll finish off the one makes in Germany with Volkswagen, as we're now up to 90.8% complete. And we've driven nearly 4,100 miles. And apparently I now have 203 cars in my garage as well. Anyway, the maroon metallic Triumph Spitfire 1500. Obviously the special colour variant, as you can see there, and this thing sells for not really much, but obviously I'm not going to do that because, well, I like to keep my cars. I'm just sentimental that way, if you follow me. Okay, I think that's enough time glaring at the other Spitfire. So, Triumph is done, and now all that's left is TVR and Volkswagen. 2 manufacturers and 4 events to go. Next up will be TVR.